So let me talk about three ends with respect to which I think Christian apologetics plays a vital, indeed a crucial role. Number one is shaping culture. Shaping culture. Apologetics is useful and may well be necessary in order for the gospel to be effectively heard in Western society today. In general, Western society is deeply post-Christian. It is the product of the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment was the age of reason during the 17th and 18th centuries in Europe. The Enlightenment introduced into Western society the leaven of secularism, which has now permeated the whole of Western culture. The hallmark of the Enlightenment was free thought. That is to say, the pursuit of knowledge by means of human reason alone, uninhibited by any sort of authority, particularly from the state or the church. Now, it's by no means inevitable that free thought is going to have to lead to atheistic conclusions. In fact, most of the Enlightenment thinkers were, in fact, believers in the existence of God. In our own day, a person like Antony Flew, for example, by following the prescriptions of free thought, himself came to believe in God near the end of his life. But still, it has been the overwhelming impact of the Enlightenment upon Western society that Western intellectuals do not consider theological knowledge to be possible. They do not consider theological knowledge to be possible. Theology is not a source of genuine knowledge, and therefore it is not a science. Reason and religion are thus at odds with each other. The deliverances of the physical sciences alone are taken as reliable guides to truth and to our understanding of the way the world is. And the confident assumption is that an unbridled, unfettered approach to the truth will issue in a purely naturalistic picture of the world. The person who follows the pursuit of reason unflinchingly to its end will be either an atheist or, at best, an agnostic. Now, why are these considerations of culture important? Well, very simply because the gospel is never heard in isolation. The gospel is always heard against the backdrop of the culture in which one lives. A person who is raised in a cultural milieu which is still open to Christianity will see Christianity as an intellectually viable option in a way that a person who is thoroughly secularized will not. For the thoroughly secularized person, you may as well tell him to believe in fairies or leprechauns as in Jesus Christ. Or to give a more realistic example, it's like you're being approached at the airport by some devotee of the Hare Krishna movement who hands you a flower and invites you to believe in Krishna. Now, such an invitation would likely strike you as bizarre, freakish, maybe even funny. But for someone in Delhi, in India, such an invitation would probably be serious cause for reflection and give him serious pause, because his cultural milieu is so different than ours. And my fear is that evangelical Christians may appear just as weird to non-believers on the streets of Bonn, Stockholm, and Toronto as do the devotees of the Hare Krishna movement. What awaits us here in North America, if our slide into secularism goes unchecked, is already evident in Europe. Although the majority of Europeans maintain a nominal affiliation with Christianity, only about 10% of the population are actually practicing Christians, and only half of those would be born-again, Bible-believing Christians. The most significant trend in European religious life has been the growth of that segment of the population which is classed as non-religious. This segment of the population grew from effectively 0% of the population in 1900 to over 22% of the population by the year 2000. And as a result, evangelism is immeasurably more difficult in Europe than here in the United States. Missionaries must labor for years and years to win even a handful of converts. Having lived for 13 years in Europe, where I spoke evangelistically on university campuses across the continent, I can personally testify to how hard the ground is. It's difficult for the gospel even to get a hearing. They can't even be open to the presentation of the gospel. I vividly recall, for example, that when I spoke at the University of Porto in Portugal, the students at the university actually suspected that I was an imposter, that I was a fraud. They could not believe that here was a person who had doctorates from 2 European universities and yet was a Christian believer. And they even telephoned the University of Louvain in Belgium, where I was working, in order to check out my affiliation with the university. That's how skeptical they were that there could even be such a thing as a Christian intellectual. For that reason, people who depreciate the value of apologetics because nobody comes to Christ through arguments are so short-sighted in their thinking. The value of apologetics extends far beyond your immediate evangelistic contact. It is the broader task of apologetics to help to shape a cultural milieu in which the gospel can be heard as an intellectually viable option for thinking men and women. In his article, Christianity and Culture, the great Princeton theologian J. Gresham Machen, on the eve of the fundamentalist controversy in 1913, wrote these prophetic words. He said, "False ideas are the greatest obstacles to the reception of the gospel. We may preach with all the fervor of a reformer, and yet succeed only in winning a straggler here and there if we permit the whole collective thought of the nation to be controlled by ideas which prevent Christianity from being regarded as anything more than a harmless delusion." Unfortunately, Machen's warning went unheeded, and Christianity retreated into the intellectual closets of fundamentalism, from which we've only recently now begun to reemerge. But now, huge doors of opportunity stand open before us. We are living at a time when Christian philosophy is experiencing a veritable renaissance, revitalizing arguments for the existence of God. At a time when science is open to the existence of a creator and a designer of the universe more so than it has been at any time in recent memory. And at a time when biblical criticism has embarked upon a renewed quest of the historical Jesus, which treats the Gospels seriously as valuable historical sources for Jesus and has confirmed the broad outlines of the portrait of Jesus painted in the Gospels. What an exciting time to be alive and to be working in the field of Christian apologetics. I am so glad to be alive now, rather than, say, back in the 30s and 40s during those dark days of intellectual eclipse of Christianity in our culture. We are well poised, brothers and sisters, to help to retake lost ground and to reshape our culture in such a way that the gospel can be once again heard as an intellectually viable option for thinking people in American society.